reading of the life and teachings of Madhwacharya. It's the book written by C.M. Padmanabhachar, which was published around 100 years ago. Boyhood up to Upanayana is the topic. We saw that Madhyageha's son Madhwacharya was being initiated into the alphabet, and that was like a very big ceremony. The gathering of kith and kin, everyone had come, and the whole house was completely full of a bustle. It was decorated, and the Aksharabhyasam was to begin. The commencement once made every day showed strides of progress. A capacity to learn of anything new without effort was soon manifest. Vasudeva allowed himself to be taught only once and no more. He tolerated no repetition or revision, for that was superfluous. Whenever his father tried to go over trodden ground, he protested and reproduced the lesson in question from his memory so as to convince Madhyageha that he need spare himself the trouble. So the commencement is the Aksharabhyasa, and once that happened, every day they used to have lessons on the Vedas and the Puranas, and it was very evident to Madhyageha that Acharya Madhva did not need any kind of repetition, because when he used to try to repeat one lesson, immediately Vasudeva used to tell him that this lesson has already been taught to me. Why are you teaching it to me again? And he used to try to, and he used to repeat the same lesson again. To avert the influence of evil eyes, Madhyageha selected some lonely place for tuition and taught his son in secret. So Madhyageha was little bit like he was so much surprised that his son was so clever and intelligent that he could retain the entire lesson upon even once if it was read out or taught. So he decided to take him to a secret place where he could teach him without the falling of the evil eyes on his little son. The extent to which Vasudeva mastered and assimilated his father's lessons soon came to be tested by an incident at Nayampalli. It happened that Vasudeva and his mother paid a visit to a relation in this village on occasion of a marriage. Madhyageha had stayed behind in Pajaka Kshetra at Nayampalli. At Nayampalli, a learned man whose name was Siva and family designation Madi Kuliyaya. He used to read the script and interpret Puranic messages to a large audience. So here we see that Madhyageha uh, was teaching Vasudeva plenty of stuff from the Puranas and the Itihasas, and he was a very, very, very good student. So the actual effect of this intelligence of Acharya came to be known when there was an incident at a village called Nayampalli. It happened that Vasudeva and his mother had gone to visit a relation there on occasion of some marriage. At that time, Madhyageha did not accompany them. He stayed back in Pajaka Kshetra. In Nayampalli, a learned man was there whose name was Siva, and his family designation was Madikulyaya or Dhautapatodbhava. He used to read the Puranas and interpret them. He used to tell the meanings of the Puranic passages to different large audiences in Nayampalli. Once what happened at that time when Vasudeva and his mother were there, they attended one such Puranic exposition. So that's what we are looking at now. It chanced that Vasudeva attended the Puranic exposition probably along with his mother. When the difficult passage was being elucidated, Siva committed a mistake. Vasudeva promptly threw in a word to correct him, to the astonishment of the assembly. He had spotted the error and made the correction before any elderly person had noticed the mistake. The boy's words were sensible, his explanation was lucid and illuminating, and his bearing dignified and noble. Every eye turned towards him, and most eyes were suffused with tears of tenderness. When the party broke up and he left the place, he was the observed of all observers. This was an incident resembling a miniature edition of those dialectical triumphs that were soon to become the distinguishing feature of his great future. So we get to be treated to Vasudeva's prowess in the Puranas. When Shiva was giving an exposition of the Puranas in a big assembly where Vasudeva and his mother also were present, he committed some mistake. The speaker, by name Shiva, he committed some mistake. Immediately, Vasudeva, in a very noble and dignified manner, in a voice that was very controlled, he immediately told that there is an error and this is the right explanation, illuminating the entire audience. By these words of Vasudeva, those who were present there, they were totally surprised. Not anyone there. There were many other older pundits, there were many other older people, but none of them had spotted the error. But Vasudeva, being so young, he had spotted the error, he corrected it, and he explained it in such a noble and dignified manner. Everyone started looking at him. Hey, look at this boy, he is so clever. Look at this boy, he is so bright. He is so intelligent. These are the things that they were all talking among themselves and they were looking at him. So, isn't this one of the, you can see that this is a miniature edition of the future Acharya who would be respected, who would be the observed of all observers in the future. When Vasudeva returned to his father, he recounted to him his little triumph and asked him in guileless innocence whether Shiva had not gone wrong. Madhyageha listened with attention and allowed that Shiva had committed a blunder. So, in order to check whether what he had said was correct, he went back to his father at Pajaka Kshetra and told him about the incident. He told him what was the error that Shiva had committed and how he had corrected it. And then Madhyageha listened to all this with attention and he understood that his son had told the right thing. Another incident of the same character is reported to have occurred in Pajaka Kshetra itself. This time it was Madhyageha himself that was explaining a Purana to a large gathering. Vasudeva sat listening with attention, carefully following the thread of the discourse. In the course of the exposition, it happened that Madhyageha passed over the word likucha that occurred in the context and failed to explain the meaning. Vasudeva quietly and respectfully drew his father's attention to the omission and gave out the appropriate exposition himself. So we see that there was another one incident of the same type and that happened in Madhyageha itself. Madhyageha was explaining Purana to a large gathering, and Vasudeva also was sitting there in the audience. He was listening, following the discourse. And during the course of the exposition, Madhyageha passed over the word likucha that had occurred in the context, and he did not even explain it also. So Vasudeva, he stood up and quietly drew his father's attention to the word, and he gave the exposition also very beautifully. The behavior of Vasudeva was striking in this instance. There was no trace or tinge of egotism or boast, either in his tone or or his demeanor. His manner was so charmingly respectful that his interruption was greatly appreciated and applauded instead of being resented. So, the attitude of the person who stood up to tell, which was Vasudeva, is being described as without any egotism. Being egoistic is something which can be seen by the speech and the body language. But the people gathered there saw that the intention of Vasudeva to stand up and say something was not to denounce the words of his father or not to show off that he knew much more, but it was just a necessity to tell the truth. And that was what was recognized by the people there, and they felt that what he did was so charming. The people in the assembly were surprised and delighted to see that tiny Vasudeva had picked up so much of Sanskrit as to subject the discourses of eminent pundits to a crucial scrutiny. Those who have read Lord Macaulay's life will not set aside these anecdotes of the boy prodigy as altogether improbable. It is said of Thomas Babington Macaulay that from infancy he showed that insatiable thirst for knowledge that prodigious tenacity of memory, the talent for phrase making, which were subsequently the delight and envy of his contemporaries. It is recorded of him that he wrote a compendium of universal history at the age of 7, besides composing 3 cantos of the Battle of the Cheviot in imitation of Sir Walter Scott. For some reason rather difficult to fathom, people are disposed to twirl their lips in incredulity and derision when a quasi miraculous story is related of Sri Madhva or other great personages of India, while they swallow without demur any tale concerning the celebrities of English literature, however extravagant it may seem in relation to average standards. Speaking humanly, even, Sri Madhva is one that has left a greater imprint on the sands of time than Macaulay, for it is given to very few heroes to strike out into original paths of religious thoughts. Such, however, is the prevailing partiality and prejudice that while literatures were only eminent phrase makers, pass for geniuses, leaders and founders of systems who build any cuts across the streams of customary thought and divert them to flow into new channels so as to fertilize unexplored fields of religious literature are very tardily allowed the measure of appreciation justly due to their leadership. So here we can see that the author Sri M. Padmanabha Acharya is feeling quite, he wants to just express his feeling of inadequacy in not for himself but for the people who have not been, thorough in their praise of Acharya Madhva's feats during his childhood. Most people tend to think that these are all some made up stories. These are too miraculous to be real. Whereas they would just believe if some other story was told about a Westerner. So he says that Acharya's works, Madhva was much more than any other person because in the imprint of time, on the sands of time, Acharya's works are much more because what did he do? He had original parts of religious thoughts. His thought on the religion was totally original, and whatever works he has done, they are those which can lead the seekers into the path of truth, which has not at all been explored so far. So such a magnificent work Madhva has done, but people are not really ready to accept it. At that time, when our author was writing, it was the time of the British rule, and people were more easily ready to acknowledge the greatness of the British people rather than of the ancient Indian saints. So that is his main main. I think that is what he wants to say about the thought that people are not ready to accept miracles as miracles when it comes to Madhva. Now we move on to the chapter 6 where they we have the where chapter 4 where we have Upanayana and the early studies, which is consisting of a few pages, and then only we come to the life of the sannyasi, which is chapter from Upanayana to sannyasa and then sannyasa. The ceremony of Upanayana, at which every Brahmin boy is invested at about the 8th year of his age, and the triple cord and introduced to Vedic studies, is a turning point of his life. The reverence with which this function used to be regarded has waned only since the popularity of English colleges in the 19th century. Of the 16 ceremonies enjoined for a Brahmin and performed more or less mechanically in the present age, Upanayana is the crowning one to which the utmost spiritual importance is justly due. For this function denotes the landmark by which he who was a Brahmana by the mere courtesy of birth becomes a Brahmana in the true sense through a process of spiritual regeneration. Brahmana denotes a knower of Brahman literally, and no person is truly entitled to this distinction and unless and until he has acquired true spiritual knowledge. So here we see that the Upanayana was a ceremony which is described by Acharya as that which is given to a boy born in a Brahmin family during the 8th year. But during the times of the British rule, this became quite a, more mechanical than a true feeling of enthusiasm for being initiated, because Upanayana is one which is the one which takes that child on the utmost important spiritual journey. It marks the beginning where the person moves on from being just a Brahmin boy by birth to a Brahmana by the knowledge that he is going to acquire. And even today we have the same ceremony, which is the process through which the sacred thread is given to the boy, and from then on the knowledge, the pursuit of knowledge is taken in a very very disciplined way. The necessary initiation takes place at Upanayana. The spiritual teacher, who may be the boy's father or any qualified guru, leading the boy unto the threshold of sacred studies and ushering him into the religion of spiritual culture. This is the milestone marking of the inception of Brahmacharya, the first of the four ashramas or stages into which the Hindu law divides the life of a Brahmana. A Brahmachari is expected to give up most of his previous habits and practices and start on a new career in which discipline and study are the ruling principles of his life. At Upanayana, he submits to the yoke of religious law and takes vows of allegiance and loyalty thereto. The triple cord, symbolizing in a sense body, mind, and speech knotted together and reduced to control, is the emblem which he is invested in token of his new position, and this he wears for life unless he enters the ascetic order later on. So here he is giving us a gist of what is the Upanayana, where they are invested with a triple cord around their neck through the one of the arms and then the waist, and this reaches up to the waist. It is like unity of the body, sense, and body, speech, and mind, and it is a diksha or a vow to keep studying as the most and main important task of the life for this complete ashrama, that is Brahmacharya ashrama, and it is worn throughout the life. The reader may feel unless and until that person takes up asceticism or sannyasa. The reader may feel tempted to inquire if the Brahmana and the Brahmacharin is a living entity in the 20th century, in the sense that those words convey etymologically. The sad confession has to be made that he is a rarity and is seldom met with as a true chip of the old block. The exigencies of modern life, the stress of Western ideas and ideals, the keen scramble for bread, the struggle and competition in which the survival of the fittest alone is the law, have made it impossible for the old order of things to continue in pristine purity. Now, the author Acharya Padmanabha gives the reader a feel of what is the brahmachari's jobs. In the previous paragraph we discussed that. In this paragraph he tells that in today's world, he's talking about the 1900s, and there itself he's saying we have to make the sad confession that the actual brahmachari is no more a brahmachari. Why? Because of the exigencies of modern life, like the stress is there on Western ideas and ideals, more so in today's world. There is a keen scramble for good job, for a good education and other things. There is a keen struggle for and competition among the people to get to the top, and the survival of the fittest is the law that works. So these things, no, they do not encourage the person initiated into brahmacharya to follow that route. If he wants to study the Vedas and the Puranas and Upanishads, he needs time for that. But present day's world is not allowing that for the brahmachari, is what is the opinion of the Acharya, as well as I think we all will agree with that. Barring honorable exceptions, it must be admitted that several of our ancient customs, habits, practices, and observances survive to this day as mere fossils of memory. Every Dvija boy passes through Upanayana even now. In what percentage of cases can it be said that the spiritual significance of the ceremony is realized? So he is now making the statement that most of the boys who have been initiated into the brahmacharya through the Upanayana do not follow the actual customs, do not understand or do not really relate to what is the ceremony and why is it for and how they would actually benefit from following it. These have not been at all understood. It's just done like a a ritual. Not one in a thousand, he says. Even if you consider 1,000 brahmacharis, not even one of them would know all these things. The occasion is availed of for festivities and tamasha, and money is spent lavishly, very often in excess of one's means, on pandals and processions. But this is not as it should be. Most Brahmana boys have their Upanayana in the 8th year of their age. It is not orthodox to cross this limit. Having regard to Vasudeva's special qualifications, Madhyageha was too impatient to wait so long. Vasudeva was barely 5 years old when an auspicious day was fixed for the purpose. The investiture with the triple cord took place with considerable solemnity as well as the great initiation. The boy was taught the sacred Om and the Gayatri mantra, the mantra of mantras, regarded as the essence of the Vedas. It is the piti prayer that every Brahmana repeats or is expected to repeat again and again, many a time every day. Ostensibly, it is addressed to the sun, but it is really a supplication to the indweller of the sun, the great Surya Narayana, for spiritual light. Gayatri is the Brahmana's motto of light, more light, a motto that characteristically sums up all his aspirations into a pursuit of knowledge. Pranava and Gayatri constitute the very breath of his spiritual respiration, and no vow or penance, no religious ceremony or function is possible without these being uttered over and over again. Elderly people resorting to rosary beads to count the number of repetitions. So we see that how Vasudeva was initiated into Upanayana at the age of 5, though normally it is on the 8th year. Because of his exemplary, interest in the religious, in spiritual matters, and his intellect, Madhyageha decided to initiate him into the triple cord at the 5th year. And he was taught the sacred Om and the Gayatri mantra, and more about the Gayatri mantra is told by Acharya that it is the prayer to the sun and the Surya Narayana, the Narayana who is inside the sun, the indweller. And it is the motto of light, more light, buddhi prachodaya. So you have to ask for more knowledge is the more buddhi, and that is what is the pursuit of knowledge for the Upanayana, for the boy who has gone through this Upanayana, is the most important objective. And towards that objective to be fulfilled, this mantra is very important tool. So the Pranava and Gayatri, which are the breath of the spiritual respiration of any boy, was much so for Vasudeva. There is no other thing that can happen without the Gayatri mantra. So when they have to do anything, they use the Gayatri mantra. And elderly people use the beads to count the number of repetitions. And they are actually supposed to do a number of repetitions every day throughout the day in 3 times. Thus, Vasudeva was ushered very early into the new phase of life for which divinity itself had marked him out. In this instance, at least, it was not an empty farce of the Purohit mumbling a jargon and the boy, together with his parents, passing mechanically through a dumb show of gestures to the bidding of the priest. Madhyageha was a learned man and his boy was a genius. They both earnestly followed the detail of the ritual in its exoteric and esoteric sense and realized in a full measure the allegorical importance of every observance connected with Sandhya Vandana and Agnihotra. So we see the Brahmanic nature in which Madhyageha lived his life by following the scriptures to the dot and understanding their significance. So he, with that kind of understanding, both the father and son were involved completely with their mind and heart into the ceremony, and they knew every meaning that was associated with the mantras in the Sandhya Vandana and Agnihotra. Vasudeva was a glorious beauty. Whoever set eyes on him felt riveted to his figure by an indescribable fascination. The way in which the little sage took to his new duties, the enthusiasm which he displayed, the radiance of new light that so overspread his face and features as to add fresh glory to the charms of his natural beauty and grace. are spoken of in glowing terms as the striking traits of an attractiveness almost hypnotic in character. As Vasudeva started doing his daily practices of reciting the Gayatri Mantra with great enthusiasm, his face and countenance acquired a new glow. The glow was already there, but it spread over his face and features so as to add a fresh glory to the charms. And anyone who looked towards him felt riveted on his face. They did not want to take away their eyes from him. That was his attractiveness. It was like a hypnotic attraction. Those who have visited Pajaka Kshetra know that on the way leading from Madhyageha's house to the Durga temple on the hilltop, an enclosure of rough stones is drawn attention to as the spot where our hero killed a gigantic serpent. It is believed that the Asura, known as Maniman in Mahabharata, dwelt in the woods as a mighty snake. Soon after the Upanayana, Vasudeva encountered this ferocious reptile in the course of his rambles. He had not strayed far from home when the serpent that had been dwelling in the thickets and bushes of the hill slope pounced upon him with fury and attacked him with his poisoned fangs. The onslaught was both quick and fierce, but Vasudeva was equal to the emergency. Cool and courageous, he received the attack with perfect composure and crushed the serpent's hood with his powerful toe. So, when we have, most of us have visited Pajaka Kshetra, and we know that the way leading from Madhyage's house to the Durga temple on the hilltop is like very rough with stones and other things. And that place, there is a place where Madhyageha son Vasudeva was attacked by a huge serpent. And this serpent is supposed to be Maniman in the Mahabharata, who was reborn as the serpent and he was waiting to attack Vasudeva. So one day when Vasudeva was going about in the place, moving from here to the temple, he was attacked by the snake. That serpent was really very strong and powerful and he tried to sting him with the poisoned fangs. But Vasudeva was very much equal to this emergency. He could easily retaliate and he crushed the serpent with his toe. That is what is the main thing that we have to see. He was a young boy and yet he had the power on his toe, in his toe, to just crush the serpent to death. Vasudeva was now a boy of tender years. The pluck and daring he evinced was such as to do credit to a warrior. The whole village was bestirred by unusual sensation on receipt of the news. Vasudeva had been attacked by a terrible snake. People were ready to faint on hearing it. The sequel relieved them by the announcement that he had been victorious. They rushed to the spot and found a mighty snake with its hood crushed into a paste. They could hardly believe their eyes at first, but the plain truth was there, beyond the pale of speculation, controversy, or conjecture. So, for us, it's very clearly seen that Acharya Madhva, as a small boy, Vasudeva, was not perturbed by the in the normal way that any other boy would. If anyone looks at a snake also, they will be scared, especially if they are as young as Vasudeva at that time. He was just 5 or 6. But he was not perturbed when the snake stung him. He was not bothered, except that he even retaliated by crushing it with his feet. So, upon hearing the news, all the villagers rushed to the place where this incident had taken place and they were totally surprised. How could such a big serpent be crushed like this just by the toe of this young boy? But they had to believe it because it was the plain truth. They could see it. What is there to speculate when you can see something? That the memory of the incident is still green and that spot is still preserved, sacred with a root enclosure, are fair proofs of an unusual occurrence. Living in the midst of hills and dales and moving constantly among serpents and wild animals, it is very unlikely that the villagers accustomed to forest life would have gone into hysterics over a mere trifle. This day, Vasudeva did not return home in the usual time, having been detained in the Manimanta spot, one cause after another, including, probably among others, the pressing inquisitiveness of the gathering crowd. His mother had been expecting him for some time and felt anxious at his prolonged absence. Evidently, she had not heard the news. Her maternal instinct scented mishap and made her restless. In a fit of unrest, she called to Vasudeva loudly by his name in the hope that he might be in the neighborhood and turn up in response. And sure enough, he did, in a twinkle. In order to effect his purpose, they say that Vasudeva took a long jump from where he was to the front of his house and presented himself before his mother. This again was a feat that Hanuman alone could have accomplished. He began the day's proceedings by performing a feat of Bhimasena by crushing a great Rakshasa with easy nonchalance. He ended the miracle by a wonderful jump. It is said that the rocky ground on which he set his feet thus with great velocity and force became indented by his footprints. Over this monument now stands a temple to signalize the event. So after that event was over and the people were gathered looking at Vasudeva's miraculous, killing of the snake, and there was people were agog with this surprise and they were very much wondering. At that time, Vasudeva's mother was getting disturbed at home. She had not heard of the this incident also because she was at home obviously, but she was wondering about him. And then suddenly she thought that if I call out the name Vasudeva, he might come and he might be somewhere nearby. He'll come. Then my heart will be at rest. She was little disturbed, and her maternal instinct was telling her that something was wrong. Actually, there was nothing wrong, but the event that the snake was attacking Vasudeva might have been a maternal instinct which caused her to worry. When she started calling out Vasudeva, Vasudeva, she got the reply in the form of the presence, like he just jumped from the place where he was located. He took one huge jump and he landed right in front of her, and looking at him she was very much at peace. So here the we have to understand that the two avatars of Acharya before this, that is the Mukhya Prana has three avatars. One of them is Hanuman, second Bhima, and third is Madhva. So here we are being recollected with the incident and the actions which show Bhimasena in the first instance where he crushed the snake with his toe, and in the jump he shows that he is Hanuman taking such a huge leap from that Vimanagiri to his house in Pajaka. He made the leap and his footprints were there. So that place also has been recognized, and now there is a temple dedicated to him in that place now. Now we come to the next part where there's a talk about the divine Maya of the Mahapurushas and how they try to think about Krishna as the young boy who showed miraculous events in his childhood. So we will go to that in the next sitting of our